my pleasure to introduce Professor Nordenson today at Tokyo University. He's a structural engineer practicing in New York and also a professor at Princeton University. We also have Professor Mutsuro Sasaki. He's a professor at Hosei University and also a structural engineer. Today's discussion would be an intro of Nordenson and also collaboration with Professor Sasaki Mutsuro's. So he's going to be talking about their collaboration and project for about 15 minutes, and followed by Nordenson's presentation, takes about 45 minutes. And following this, there's going to be a discussion among those two, and the discussion will be open to the audience later on. So instead of having a formal lecture, we would like to have this occasion as an informal as well as active place where you can have a conversation between the presenter and the audience. So while you're listening, maybe you can think about some of the questions you wanted to ask at the end of the lecture. So with that, I'm going to introduce Professor Mutsuro Sasaki.
皆さんこんばんは。私イントロや潜在役でお話しさせていただきます。下手くそな英語で喋ると誤解を招くので、基本的に僕は日本語でお話しさせていただきます。イさんとはですね、イさんの経歴はもう先ほどちょっと紹介があったと思うんですが、非常に面白いなと思ったのは、彼は MIT で、文学、哲学、それからシビルエンジニアというかなり広範なことを勉強した後、その後専門的にバークレー、カロリアン・バークレー大学ですね、そこでストラクチャーエンジニアリングを勉強した。なるほどなっていう感じもする。つまり非常にそのリベラルアーツの面でも深いを持ってて、でなおかつエンジニアとしても非常にシャープなものを持ってる。そういうことで、そうですね、彼とは20年来の付き合いをさせてもらっております。非常によく気持ちが通ずるというか、一緒にコラボレーションしてても非常にスムーズにいくっていう関係で、この20年来ております。というようなことで、最初にですね、彼と出会ったのが1989年に東京フォーラムコンペティションがあって、その時にラファエル・ビニョル選手がですね、それの構造コンサルタントをイさんがニューヨークのアルプ事務所のディレクターとして担当して、そんなことで1990年、1年後ぐらい、半年後か1年ぐらいでしたかね、そういう後に日本でそれを実現するにあたっては、日本の本エンジニアがいるだろうというようなことで、僕のお師匠さんだった木村敏彦さんのところにそういう依頼があって、それで、そんなようなことが縁で、1990年に初めて僕はニューヨークで、取りまして、その時に、基本設計を引き継いでやっていくにあたって、そのことに注意したらいいかっていう、そんな議論をした記憶があります。で、その時に僕が非常に記憶にあったのは、地震国ですよね、日本は。で、かなり東京フォーラムの最初デザインが変わったんですけども、やはりガラスが大々的に使われるっていうところがあって、そういうところに対して耐震設計どうするんだっていう、そういうことが一番話題になった。その時に意表をつかれたっていうわけでもないんですが、彼がその動的な問題ですね、ダイナミックアナリシスについて非常に詳しい。で、なんでアメリカのしかも東海岸のエンジニアがそういったことに対して、こんなに知識があるんだろうっていう。で僕も、当時木村さんのことで地震のプログラムそういうことをやってましたんで、得意とするところではあったんだけども、アメリカのエンジニアでこんなことを 非常にこう重要視してしゃべる、まあ非常に理知的で理性的で、びっくりしたというか、ギーさんは僕のほぼ10歳下です。1955年までそうですね、9歳、正確に言うと9歳ですが、まあ、ちょっと一種の、カルチャーショックというと変ですけども、思いもかけない、印象が、それが一番最初の出会いでしたね。そんなことでしばらくずっと実はその後ちょっと不幸があって、微妙にのところとあるのところが、世間のことでバズっちゃって、で結局アラフ事務所の方が降りたんですね。で結果的に、日本でやるとなって、木村先生もちょっと、そのままやらかろうということで、OB、渡辺邦さんだとか、私とか、水原さんだとか、何かでチームを組んで、それを引き継いでいったということで、それで一度そこで中断しちゃったんですね。ところが、2000年ぐらいになった頃に、トレドの美術館をやるっていう話が、瀬島さんの方から出てきて、で、それについて誰かおすすめのエンジニアがいないかっていう、そういう話が出て、僕もすぐにその時に、これはいいなっていうことで、実はこういう人がいるんだで、ギーさんを紹介して、こういうエンジニアとして、始めてもらった。それが、で、その最初の打ち合わせかなんかを、ギーさんに、お願いするということを決めて、打ち合わせを、2001年、忘れもしない、9月5日から10日、僕、ニューヨーク出所したんですね。で、日付変更してたんで、帰ってきた時に、ちょうど僕帰ったら、ワールドトレードセンターが、埋まってたっていう、ちょうどまさにそのタイミングで、ギーさんの事務所で、打ち合わせを前日までやって、帰ってきたところだったっていう、本当に非常に印象的なことでもあったんだけども、すぐに彼のオフィスはワールドトレードセンターに比較的近いなんだっけな、双方があるあたりですよね。すぐびっくりして、大丈夫かっていうメール入れたら、騒然としてるけども、大丈夫かっていう返事もらって安心した記憶があります。そのようなことで、最初のトレードの仕事のキックオフしてたんですね。今日はそのあまり詳しいこと僕も昔のことでもあるし、資料が私の東映庁の田舎の方で全部引っ払っちゃってるものですから、いい資料がないんですけども、何枚か集めてきたやつを見せながらちょっと話をします。ここにあるように非常にこれは僕書いてある通りですね、非常に規模の小さいですけども、でも素晴らしい建物、いい試合になっているので、サプスっていうのはサーキャンパートナーズっていう海外のプロジェクトは2つ今会社があって、1つ海外プロジェクトにはサプスっていう形の組織を使っています。で、それとギーさんのところですね、実設計はギーさんのところでお願いしている。ほとんどこれわからないようななんだやさっぱりわからないようなですけども、要するにこのようなわからないような空間を作りたい瀬島さんらしいものですけども、でここに当然ですけど、平屋ですよね。非常に単純な構造ですけど平屋で、非常に抽象性の高いガラッとした不思議な空間を作りたい。この水玉みたいなやつになってるこれガラスです。でその間にもう一枚入ることで干渉し合って不思議な、スペースを作りたい。これはもうその時のイメージ模型ですね。 橋が新しいものがどっかにちょろちょろっとあるぐらいで、非常にフラットなルーフに何本かのひょろひょろとした橋が降りてるだけっていう、まあ、見た目なんですよ。こんな形のものを作りたいんだっていう、こんなことを前提にして始めたものです。途中のいろいろ資料はあるんですが、ちょっとそういうことで手元にないんで、いきなりいつもの話になっています。最初はフラットなルーフはそれまで、もう仙台だとかいろんなところでやってきてたんで、サンドイッチパンみたいにしてね、非常に薄っぺらい鉄板でできたものをやろうというふうに考えてたんですが、コストが大変だという、まあ日本のようなわけにもう施工においてもいかないだろうということで、急遽非常に単純なシステムに切り替えて、これで見て分かるように柱のあるところに沿ってちょっと蛇行したり、面のオーバリングといったりとかかかって、それに直方向に 1.5 メーターピッチぐらいでしたかね、重室の並びに。で、あとはもうおしまいよっていう。コストもこれぐらいにしないと収まらないものなんですから、最初にこんな形で D さんを見てみてもらって、で、経理のものです。で、ところどころご力に対してグレースイングを持てるという、この絵でもちょっと出てますね。それ何か所かある。あるいはちょっとこの絵では出てきてませんけど、中で鉄板で作った倉庫かトイレだったか、そういうようなプルスのところをこう形にして、横力に対して安定させるという、そんな形で進めていったもの。これがトイレの美術館のほとんど躯体が終わりにかけてですね、地下がこの下にあります地下があるしで、地上階が鉄骨構造で、これはB さんと何の点でしたかね、ちょっとはっきりしませんけども、多分ハーバードとかとプリンストン大学で2004年に僕レクチャーから生まれてた時があったんで、多分その時に現場を見に行った時の写真だと思います。この形で、進められて、これも完成した、皆さんもご存知とは思いますが、これがその先ほどの内部がね、こんなふうに細い柱とフラットなルーフで、非常に扁平な屋根で中に屋根して、デザインされている。鉄板でやるっていうことももちろん選択肢で先ほど言ったようにあったんだけども、日本と違うしているわけですね。非常にシンプルに扱っている、そういう建物でした。これが完成した時ですかね。で、次がニューミュージアムですね。これは2003年からとなってますね。2004年に先ほどのハーバードでレクチャーするときに兼ねて D さんとその時もこれを打ち合わせしたいということになりますけども、これはニューヨークのダウンタウンのところに、日本だとちょっと大変そうだけども、アメリカからできたという、そういうプロジェクトですけども、これは模型、イメージ模型ですけども、こんなふうに建物がボコボコとボリュームがいろいろ変化する、こんなものを作りたい。これは設計以前の話です。で、日本だったらちょっとね、これはいかがなものかという話になっちゃうんですけども、50メーターぐらい、日本でいうとほぼ超高層に相当するぐらいのボリュームの高さの建物ですけども、佐賀の方で、通常のデザインしちゃうと車線制限があるので非常にこの高さだと形が決まってしまう。単純に言うとこういって、どれをするんですか。 ですね、これが前面道路で、これぐらいの高さになると、ここら辺からカクンと引っ込んで、単純に言うとこういうプロポーションになっちゃうんですね。で、コンペの時ほとんどのオーバーがそういう形だったのに対して、やっぱり我々で、オーバーもう少しこう、ボリュームをいろいろ操作して、それで日英とか、それを避けようって言って、こんな変な得意な形になってたんですが、ありがたいことに地震がない。特に東日本ね、風が主たる、極力に対してのガイドですから、それぐらいの手だったら若干こうなってもいいだろうっていう、踏み入れつけて進めたということで、最初はこんなふうに最後の構造だと見ても見つかないようなもんですけど、とりあえずガタガタしてでも上の力が下に流れていくよっていうような程度で、今回の時には出して、でその後いろいろスタディをして、いろいろ細かくやっていく中で、このだって左側ですね、左側の方が、その外角のところにそのダイヤモンドトラスを入れてチューブ状に持っていって全体の力を流そうっていう、そういう案に、システムに切り替えて、それを、現実のちょっと向きがね、僕の方で作ったモデルと E さんの方で作ったモデル、向きがちょっと違うんですけど、90度回転すると同じになります。ということで、いろいろ調整してもらって、右のようなモデルで最終的にはセッティングして、それでこのぐらいに現実の、これは風ですね、風に対する力に対しての右側の民間のこういう力ですけども、左がその実際のブレス、大学ブレスですね、こういう形で、デザインしていってもらった。これ、実際に今度完成したものです。ほぼ当初の意図がそのまま実現されたということで、キーさん、さっき僕ちょっと言ったように、エンジニアなんだけども、非常に柔軟で、特に、今、ブリストン大学で教鞭を取ってることでもあるように、建築デザインっていうのと、それと、エンジニアですね、それを非常に理解があるというか、非常に僕がいろいろ理想としている仮面に対して、本当によく理解してくれて、さらに提案してくれるという、コラボレーションとした本当に素晴らしい第2作目ができたかなということですね。昼間は昼間で非常に魅力的な第2回なんだし、夜は夜でまた不思議な表情を出してる。さっきのトレドとはまた全然別な建築あるいは構造ですけども、サナの求めている建築の構造にはなり得たんじゃないかというふうに思います。これはその今の開発の場所ですね、ミュージアムで、おととしかサナがプリカショを取った時の記念の写真です。で、その時に僕は左にいるの E さんですね。で、右にいるのはグローマンさんって言って、B&G っていうヨーロッパでプロジェクトをやるときに、エンジニアでいろいろお願いしているグローマンさんです。で、そのヨーロッパでのプロジェクトで協力していただいている人ですが、僕がスケマティックデザインをやって、ギーさんとグローマンさんのところで実績をやって、現場まで含めてですね、まとめていってもらっている、非常に大事なパートナーです。で、これは同じくその後でしたかね、ギーさんの招待で、そのプリカションの翌日でしたが、ニューヨークで、よくギーさんと招待された時いつもだったと思うんだけども、フランス料理屋さんって、一番右手にいる人はイサム・ノリスさんの財団の理事長をやってる庄司さんから、真ん中にいるのはグ スリー・ロバーソンさんですね。ギーさんとはニューヨークで一応ストラクチャーエンジニアということで、非常に仲がいいということで、何度も私はお会いしてますけども、そういうメンバーで、食事をした後だと思います。で、これ最後にちょっともう一枚。これサポートのリゼストっていうことで、ストラクチャーエンジニアリングデザインイノベーション。ニーナ・ラパポートさんっていうのは、シカゴ大学の、歴史家ですかね、エンジニアリングに非常に詳しい方がまとめたので、世界であるんだとか、マリックスがある中で、ニューヨークではレスリー・ロバーソンの事務所と、ギー・ノルデンソンさんの事務所が出す、ちょっと字が小さくてすみませんが、僕はギーさんですね。私がさっきサーギャンのパートナーズとして紹介されて、同じ本で紹介されているように、要するにエンジニアリングをどうデザインの建築デザインの中に取り込んでいくかっていうので、比較的最近の動きですね、それをまとめてもらったときに、ギーさんとも話して協力している。で、ここにちょっと今日用意してありませんけども、2006年から7年にかけてですかね、今日いらっしゃってる川口守先生なんかもそこで、お話になったキャンデラレクチャーっていうのをギーさんが取り仕切って、それで、7人のストラクションエンジニアたちが、キャンデラ、もちろんキャンデラと直接関係しているわけじゃないんだけども、それぞれの立場で、今空間構造系が多かったですかね、そういった話をまとめてくれる、非常に面白い本が出てますけども、それをなんかもイーさんのオマから出してましたので、ね、そういったことをやってる。非常にそういうことで、エンジニアというだけじゃなくて、出版とか、そういう全体をまとめていくような文化活動を含めて、活躍している、僕の、自己範囲ですけど、とても信頼のおける、そして尊敬できる、友人のということで、この後お話をいただくということで、次だと思います。じゃあ、OK。
Sasaki-san and his work, I called it EBB and FLUX. FLUX referring to the work of Sasaki and his partners. EBB because I want to talk a little bit about the way in which structural engineering can have a place as a kind of ephemeralization of material and structure. So in a sense, talking about structure that disappears, or talking about ideas that are embodied in structure but that aren't necessarily immediately visible. So in that sense, it's about engineering ephemeral things, ephemeral. I want to talk about three themes. I've organized the material into these three themes. First is to do with buckling, which is something that over the years I've become more and more fascinated with and seen in many of the projects that we're involved in. The second, I want to talk about hypothin, which is a term taken from the artist Duchamp, which has to do, and some of this refers to some of the work that we've done together, to projects where thinness becomes almost extreme. And then finally, vortex, which refers in part to torsion, which, as you'll see, is something that I've also worked with on a number of projects. Buckling is, as some of you know, buckling is something that we try to avoid in structures, but the susceptibility to buckling is something that maybe we feel present in some situations. If you look at Crown Hall, the building that Ms. Munro designed for the Architecture School at IIT in Chicago, it's a structure that's supported on a series of plate girders that are above the roof and carry below it the structure holding up the roof. And one of the things that you'll find if you go into the archive at MoMA and read the correspondence around this project is that there was quite a lot of concern by the contractor that these girders would buckle, that they would buckle sideways, lateral torsional buckling. And in fact, there's a letter from the engineer, Frank Kornacher, to the contractor explaining how the connection between these purlins and the girders, which is a rigid connection, was keeping those girders from flopping over. It's not something that most people are aware of, but I think that the fact that these are standing up and that at some level there's inherent instability embodied in them is, I think, part of the energy and impact of this building. The other thing that's interesting, and I think is related to that, is the ambiguity in the way the structure functions. If you look at it from the outside, it's quite clear that there are primary elements and secondary elements, and these primary elements are related to those girders. But when you step away and you start looking at it, it becomes a little bit more ambiguous, and then when you're inside the building, that relationship disappears altogether. And I think that's part of what is very interesting about Mises' work, which is this dematerialization or ephemeralization of the structure, which happens in this case from an outside that is very clear and very almost didactic to a condition on the inside that makes it almost feel as if the roof is floating on light. So a couple of projects that I'd like to show you quickly that relate to this theme. This is a bridge that we completed a couple years ago at Yale, which is a pair of little walkways that are on an avenue at Yale University called Hillhouse Avenue. And the idea with this was to take a very typical structure, which is a through girder structure, and adapt it in a way that has to do with this problem of lateral torsional buckling. If you think about this kind of structure, it's been around for quite a while. This is a Victorian structure in Regent Park in London. In a case like this, there are these large brackets that are set outside the girder, which help keep the girder from flopping over, from buckling sideways. In our bridge, what we decided to do instead was to take the web and fold it so that the folds of the web would serve as a vertical wall or cantilever that would keep the top from flopping over. And we varied that corrugation in the middle, where there's more of a tendency for that buckling to occur, was greater. At the ends, where actually the web, the vertical plane, wants to buckle, it was also corrugated. But in between, we let it relax a little bit and have less corrugation. In addition, we perforated the web so that you would see through it and you would feel the great lightness of that system. And in fact, it starts to work then with a kind of Urinel structure in the web. The fabrication was tricky because the web is very thin. And so getting the tolerances right took a lot of effort by the fabricator. Because when you weld a thin plate like that, it tends to distort. But they were pretty successful in doing it. They were all fabricated in one piece and brought out and installed each on either side of the roadway bridge. see that there's very subtle variation in the folds, but it does give you a sense of the experienced and dynamic quality of that idea. Earlier than that, a number of years ago, I worked with Takushi on modern art in New York, and there were two interesting features to this project from this standpoint. One has to do with this wall, which is a tall glass wall made with very thin members, which I'll show you in a second. The second was a situation that was quite interesting. We were in the middle of the production of documents when the museum staff explained that they weren't very happy about the presence of a column in one of the main galleries. And so we found a way, because we had structure in the portion of the tower above the gallery space, to hang part of the structure from above and get rid of that column. What was interesting about this in this respect was that we did this late in the process of design, and so it seemed quite remarkable that we were able to get rid of this column, even though we already had this structure in there as part of the wind system. It became part of the story around the project, and as people went around visiting the museum during construction, they were taken to this spot where this column had disappeared. It was explained to them that this was a very special place because the column that was once there had disappeared. The second part of the project was the construction of this wall, which is very similar to the wall here at Ueno Park at the Horiguchi Treasures building, except with the mullions spread further apart. And like that wall, it's built of steel bars that are spanning 20 meters vertically and are held halfway up by these props that hold them in and out of plane, but otherwise are dependent on the rigidity of the joints to keep them from buckling laterally. So here again, the main focus of the design was to create as slender a member as possible. These are 5 centimeters wide and they span 20 meters. As slender as possible to keep the thinness of the structure. At the point where it connects to the tower part of the building, there's a spring actually, so that when they move relative to each other in an earthquake, there's no transfer of load. And that in turn makes it more difficult for the stability of that structure to be maintained. In the end, I think it makes for a very, very thin and elegant structure, one that really depends on its stability through the rigidity. A more recent project, which is still under construction, is a museum across from the Kimball Art Museum designed by Louis Kahn. This is a project designed by Renzo Piano. And here we've used a series of beams spanning the same distance as the shells in the Kahn building, so spanning 100 feet, which is the same as the shells. This is the existing Kahn building. This is the new pavilion designed by Renzo Piano. This is the Kahn building. This is Kahn under construction. And what we did in this case to create a relationship with the Kahn building was build this structure out of wood. So here we have beams that span 100 feet from column to column, and they're paired sections of wood that are 4 feet tall, about this tall, and 8 inches wide, so 20 centimeters wide. And they're paired. They're 10 feet apart, there to there, and you can see there are 2 of them side by side. And here again, the challenge that we created for ourselves was to make a very slender structure that would be really entirely controlled by its tendency to buckle laterally. So we were basing the design on the limiting case of the lateral torsional buckling of these beams. Here they are on site. These are part of a metal system that's built inside between the the beams. Here you can see, which is a series of machined aluminum parts which effectively create a rigid connection between the pairs of beams so that when they try to rotate side to side, there is stiffness there that prevents that rotation from happening, as well as there's a transfer of lateral load through them acting as a kind of Iredale on side to side. So these, what we call dog bones, serve both the purpose of rigidity in the side-to-side direction, but also keeping the beams from rolling as well. There you can see them being installed. There is a very fine horizontal brace system that holds the middle plane of the wood side to side, but the rotation of the wood, the lateral torsional buckling, again, the same thing as Crown Hall, is prevented by this system of clips on going across. This is the end piece that is here, where there's a rod that comes through here at the end and a post that holds the beam up. There is a model of it in the architect's office. There are sliding bearings at the end because it's held from below. It's important to let it move that way so that there are no end moments added to it. But you can see they're quite tall, quite slender. And again, the controlling factor here is the lateral torsional buckling. Another project also under construction right now is the Corning Museum of Glass in Corning, New York, with the architect Thomas Pfeiffer. This is, again, a series of very thin beams. These are made of concrete. These are 2.5 inches wide and 4 feet deep, so extremely thin, and again, controlled by the lateral torsional buckling of the system. These are renderings of those beams, and they serve as a light filter as well. So all projects where, in a sense, the idea of the structure is not something that is apparent immediately, and maybe not be apparent to most people at all, but maybe to an engineer coming in or someone attuned to the normal thickness and thinness of things. There's a sense that there is inherent in the structure a certain tension or instability that is incipient, if you will, that is almost occurring. Related to that is this idea of thinness, which has to do really as in a sense with the way in which not only things appear thin, but there is a kind of ambiguity to the reading of the project. One of my favorite projects in this respect is the Beinecke Library designed by Gordon Butschaft of SOM at Yale. And it was engineered by a man I used to work for, Paul Weidlinger. It's a skin structure which is translucent. This is marble that lets light come through this building. So from the outside, it looks like a big box, but in fact, this is a Virendale structure that is spanning to the corners, and the Virendale is embedded inside stone and precast concrete cladding. So in here, there's a steel structure, and then inset between the steel structure is the stone, which lets light come through. A very difficult structure, I think, for most people to read, because everything has been collapsed into one surface. If you look at it, again, coming in, you also have the sense, which I think you get at Crown Hall, that there's this almost levitation of the building on a cushion of light, the way that the light is very strong underneath and coming up through it. There's no evidence around the edge of any support as well. The structure, as I said, is a Virendale structure. These are tapered members, so they actually go from being thin here to thicker at the crossing, like butterflies almost, and they come around and create a cage that holds out the outer part of the building, supported on these pillars. So I think there's something there That is stimulating in a way to both architects and engineers because of the ambiguity of the reading, because of the difficulty there is in being able to disentangle what is surface, what is texture, and what is structure. And at the same time, that once you've understood it, there's a clarity and intelligence about both of those elements. The World Trade Center, designed by Les Robertson, that Sasaki-san referred to earlier, is another case, slightly different, that I think refers to this idea. The building was a tube frame, actually made almost entirely of Japanese steel on the outside. It was constructed, as it turned out, by using 14 different types of steel. This is a drawing that my students did at Princeton a number of years ago for an exhibition that was at the Museum of Modern Art on tall buildings, which occurred a couple of years after September 11, 2001. And we took the construction documents of the building that we had from Robertson's office, and we drew on them. We drew on this drawing the type of steel that existed throughout the structure. The way the structure was designed, it was all made up of plates welded into sections, boxes for the columns, and solid plates for the beams. It makes it into a kind of cage structure all the way around, which makes the perimeter rigid and very effective against the wind. The type of steel in all of these varies quite a bit. You don't see that, but you can draw that situation and see that as you move across each face of the tower, you get the blue, which is the low-strength steel, and the red, which is the high-strength steel, and a variation in between. The reason why Robertson did this is very interesting. If you look at these kinds of structures, these tube structures, what happens when they resist lateral loads is that there is a tendency for the forces to stay concentrated in the corner, something called shear lag. So even though you want the thing to behave as if it was a complete tube, it doesn't do that because there's a difficulty for the forces to work their way around the corner. What Robertson did was to counteract that effect by using very high-strength steel in the corners. And because he was using high-strength steel, he was able to reduce the size of the steel. In reducing the size of the steel, he made it softer because there was less plate thickness. And as a result, the forces tended to migrate away from the corner into the body of each face. But he was moving the forces consciously around by using different types of steel to get smaller member sizes in places that he wanted to unload in favor of other parts. So what you see when you read this drawing is that very conscious effort in directing the flow of forces. The other thing that happens is this was the first building built in the United States that used a wind tunnel. And because these are two buildings side by side, and they're along the waterfront in New York, there's a very different kind of wind climate going around this building. So the wind from the northeast and the northwest tends to be stronger, but these buildings shelter each other because of their relationship. And so the determining factor for these forces was a function of that wind environment and the relationship between the two buildings. And so what you see is a combination of all these factors. The way the wind environment is influencing the forces, the way the relationship between the two buildings is influencing the force, and the way that Robertson himself was trying to redirect those forces as well. So it's a very complex and very interesting way of reading what's both happening in the environment and in the structure and the engineer's intention, all of which, of course, is invisible in the final structure and only revealed if you go into the construction documents and you read that in some way through this kind of interpretation. A project that we did a couple of years ago, an exhibition at SciArc, we tried to figure out a way to get something to be perfectly flat while it was very, very long. This is a 40-foot long beam which we were hanging from above, and we tried to make this out of little plates of steel that we would bolt together against the form that we made, which basically shaped that beam so that it was the opposite of what it would want to be when it deflected. It was an experiment that didn't altogether work, but it was an attempt at getting that kind of unexpected flatness through this process of fabrication. This was trying to put it together. Things started to fail, so we ended up having to clamp, and it was an experiment that was a lot of fun. It didn't quite work out, but it definitely taught us something about the ways to express an idea. Toledo, which was the first project that we did together, was a remarkable experience for me coming in to this project at the beginning and being shown this image and told that this was really what the building was going to be, which I had a tough time at that point imagining, but in fact that's what we ended up with. One of the things that was quite fortuitous was that because the column locations were determined by their ability to be placed in relationship to the rooms, they don't line up. And so when you go into the space, you can't really tell what is holding up the roof. And most people go away thinking that it's the glass that's holding up the roof. The package was very thin. This was kept 2 feet, and so it was very complex to get everything to fit together. We had to embed all the utilities and make sure that there was enough clearance even between the bolts and the glass passing through. These were some of the coordination drawings. It was really almost like designing a printed circuit. Sometimes when you look at these drawings, it was as if we were looking at some sort of Intel chip that we were working through. Here you can see how the glass shoe has to get by very tight tolerances relative to the rest of the structure. The new museum. So in Toledo, the challenge was to make the horizontal surface as thin as possible. In the new museum, the challenge was to make the vertical surface as thin as possible. And as Sasaki-san showed, we had a structure made of trusses stacked up all the way up, so that each box, in effect, became a kind of truss structure holding itself up. The shifts in the plan create glass skylights that bring light in. The diagram, as you've seen, of the forces. One of the interesting spots right here was this point where the shift is on a diagonal. And so here these are the structure that you see on the inside. But in that corner, we were able to support the structure from above. So when you go into that space on the second floor, there's a nice mysterious moment here where you can't quite tell what's holding up this floating corner of the building above. And you saw the diagram earlier that Sasaki-san showed of how that worked. The last section I wanted to talk about is to do with vortex. Vortex is a term that I got originally from Edward Pound, poet, American poet. And in Pound's case, it referred to the cultural moments where there's a remarkable convergence of influences that makes a project or a historical moment particularly significant. I think one of those situations, and this has to do a lot, I think, with the idea of collaboration, is the Menil collection in Houston, which was Luciano's project, working for Dominique de Menil and working with Peter Rice and other engineers at ARA. What was remarkable about the project is that it was a moment in the careers of all work something together that was truly innovative and unusual. And I think that it's interesting to reflect back on the projects. To me, the Beinecke Library at Yale is one of those projects where you see that everyone involved in the project is working at their best. I think for me at least, and perhaps with Sasaki, I think the Toledo project was one of those projects where there was the first project of Sejima and Ishikawa in America. It was our first collaboration together as well. There was an energy about that project and an opportunity with a great client to do something that was highly unusual and unexpected. And I think that's the case with the Menil and the level of invention that occurred there, which is why I think even today it's a project that many people admire. You probably know this already, but the leaves were made using a ferrous cement system. They're combined with ductile iron to make these trusses that hold up the roof. There's an elaborate system of bringing air from below and then capturing the air in the space between these leaves and the glass roof and then pulling it out again. So it's sophisticated in the way in which the structure works, the way the structure participates in bringing the light down, and also the way in which the air conditioning is handled. When I started working on the Kimball with piano, which is the first project I ever done with piano, this was of course very important since it was also a project in Texas, and in some respects it was Kimball that influenced many of the ideas behind this project. One of the things that I was hoping that we would achieve with the new Kimball was a structure that, like this, had a strong contrast of light and dark. And I think with the wood beams that we have in the new Kimball, we will also have a very nice situation where there's more play of light and dark as there is in this project. This is a building that was built a number of years after the Menil, but is also at the Menil. It's a chapel which was built to house two frescoes which had been loaned from Cyprus. The glass chapel built to resemble the chapel where the frescoes had once lived in Cyprus. And it's a structure made, this is the outside of the building, it's a lattice of rods that are pulled in tension between the roof and the floor, and then a group system of glass panels that are attached inside that. The project was up for 15 years. It's since now been dismantled, and the frescoes have returned to Cyprus. So this is a project that had a very limited life. This is it under construction. You can see the rod system there, and these are the glass pieces being put in. This is a small glass stair that we did a couple of years ago, which had a famous visitor a few years later. This is based on a principle that has to do with torsion, which is something called the cantilever stair. This is a stair that Palladio designed at the Academia in Venice. This is an even older stair that I found on an island in Greece. Basically, the principle of these stairs is that each of the steps is supported by the step below and below and below coming down to the ground, which allows the steps to be connected only on one end to the wall. So they call them sometimes cantilever stairs, but they're not really cantilevers. What's happening is that one end is built into the wall, the other end is free, like that, and each step is leaning on the next one. And so the only thing that the wall has to do is resist the twist. So what we did with this structure is the same thing. The wall is glass. These are tubes that stick through the wall. These are these shoes that create the connection between the glass and the tubes. And then between the tubes, we have the steps made of plates that go from the underside of one tube to the top of the next one. So it becomes a continuous, again, a continuous connected ladder of structure. These are some of the analysis that we did to make sure that the glass would be okay. This is some tests that we did as well. here's the glass before they put the steps in. Here's the glass going in as well. So again, it looks as if it's cantilevering from the glass, but in fact, it's really leaning on each step going down to the bottom, only requiring the glass to resist the twist. And this was an idea really completely and directly borrowed from Palladio. I wanted to see whether there would be a way to take this sort of cascade of torsion and adapt it to a more modern material. This is a theoretical project that we did, which leads into the next and last project I want to show you. We were working 6 years ago on an alternative for the TV stations to have a broadcast tower that would not be located at the World Trade Center site. And there was a period where the Port Authority that is responsible for the buildings of the World Trade Center was thinking that maybe they wanted to have a separate facility for the broadcast tower. So we came up with this design of something we call 7 stems, which is made up of 7 tubes that come up and bypass each other so they don't intersect. They're always independent, and they're connected every so often by these beams that run between them. It's a 2,000 foot tall, about 600 meter tall structure that is a vertical pyramid. That's a plan view of all the connectors that occur every 70 feet as you go up. Now, one of the things that we were interested in with this was the possibility of placing the tubes relative to each other in such a way that we would minimize drag. There's some interesting research that's been done for hanger cables on suspension bridges that show that if rods are a certain distance apart, there's actually certain benefits from an aerodynamic drag point of view. So we wanted to see whether we could find a way to orient each of those stems such that the drag, wind drag, would be minimal in relation to the maximum wind forces that come in, the hurricanes from the northeast. So, in effect, a way of tuning the structure to provide the least resistance in the direction of the greatest wind. So we did some computational fluid dynamics studies looking at ways in which we could minimize the drag. A colleague of mine developed some surfaces that were based on the experiments that I showed you. And in effect, we created what we call the drag rose, which was the representation of the drag, which we could organize in such a way that it was minimal in the direction where the wind was maximum. And in effect, try to find a way to express the wind environment through the arrangement of the structure along the lines really of what Robertson had done in a different way with this tower and the World Trade Center. The final project is was in a way inspired by this tower. We were working on the tower for this location, and as we were working on it, I became quite interested in this part of New York, which is what's called the Upper Harbor, the bay, much like Tokyo Bay, the bay that is inside and the harbor for New York. And having grown up in New York, it struck me that this was not a place that was very familiar or thought much about in New York by people that live there. But as the city has become more and more regional, it seemed to me that this is a place that was worth considering as a potential public space in the city. Together with that, we wanted to think about sea level rise and the consequences of climate change. New York has a particularly high sea level rise predicted because there's a combination of dropping in the ground that's happening as well as the sea level going up. So compared to other places around the world, it actually has more sea level rise predicted than some other places. We already have flooding, and as you may have heard, we had a bad storm recently where the flooding was quite extensive. And so for different categories of hurricane, large parts of the city are susceptible to be flooded. So what we were proposing was a project that had two main purposes. One was to create a public space in the region out of this body of water, to make it much more accessible and much more part of the region, a little bit like Tanya's project for Tokyo Bay many years ago, occupying the bay, in this case, more natural islands and other structures, not so much with buildings. But this is still something that hadn't been proposed in a long while because of some of the concerns about environmental impact. What we were saying was, because of the environmental changes that result from climate change, we need to think about ways in which we can add things to the bay, wetlands, for example, which are going to get lost because of sea level rise. So we proposed this approach. We argued that in some ways it does for the region what Central Park did in the 19th century for Manhattan. When Central Park was built, there was nothing around it. But by creating an empty space and defining the boundary of that empty space, it created the edge, which has since become the edge that Manhattan comes up to and surrounds this big public space that's so important for New Yorkers. Similarly, in Venice, the basement St. Mark's is a public space. Space for boats are out, but it's still public space. Public space that can be on the water. Part of this was a scientific study. We wanted to see whether this idea of putting islands in the bay would actually help us from a storm protection standpoint. And so we built models of the bathymetry, the topography under the water, combined those with the topography of land, and so we had these digital models that we could use to do some computational simulations to look and see when we followed the storm surge coming into the bay, the production of islands would have any benefit. So without islands, with islands, what would be the results? And we worked together with colleagues in engineering to create an artificial hurricane, basically, actually a hurricane that was displaced, which we could then use to generate the storm surge. And what you find is that the height of the storm surge, in this case 3.5 meters, is no different with or without the islands, but the velocity is different without the islands. And if you think about earthquake engineering, which is something that I've been involved in over the years, it's very similar to the idea of earthquake engineering that through ductility or energy dissipation, you're able to diminish the impact of a natural force on structures. And so in this sense, what we're trying to say is that these barriers, these obstacles in the way of the storm surge, have the role of dissipating the energy of the storm and making things better for structures that are on land. So this is a somewhat whimsical idea, but using subway cars, which are in fact used offshore to build reefs, windmills, and wetlands that could be the replacement of wetlands that are submerged under rising sea levels. This got a lot of attention in the last couple of months because of the last hurricane that we had in New York. So believe it or not, it's now becoming actually a serious possibility that some of these things could get built. This is a visualization of what Lower Manhattan could look like with these kinds of structures